The email arrived at 2:47 a.m., and Amy Holt was awake to see it. She'd been awake most nights for the past month, running background checks on a fraud case that paid well enough to keep her laptop open past midnight. The security alert banner dropped across her screen without ceremony. Unusual login detected on monitored account. She clicked it before her mind registered why the account name looked familiar. Marcus.Holt, 1998yahoo.com. Her father's email, the one he'd set up when she was in first grade, back when people still wrote out the year in their handles like it meant something. The one that had sat dormant since March 2002. Amy stared at the alert. Her hand moved to the touchpad, hesitated, then opened the account recovery portal. She'd set up monitoring 6 years ago during a contract job that taught her how to track digital footprints. She'd told herself it was just practice. She'd never expected the alert to actually fire. The login had originated from an IP address in Idaho. Belmont, according to the geolocation data. Population 3,200. The session had lasted 11 minutes. Someone had checked the inbox, opened 3 messages, then logged out. Amy pulled up the account's access history. She had to authenticate twice to get past Yahoo's security layers, but her credentials were current. She'd maintained them through 3 platform updates. The logs loaded slowly, line by line, timestamps scrolling down the screen. Her chest tightened. The account hadn't been dormant. There were logins going back years, dozens of them, hundreds. Someone had been accessing this account regularly since 2004, just quietly enough that no one noticed. The pattern was consistent. Every 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes more frequently. Sessions ranging from 5 to 20 minutes. The IP addresses varied slightly, but always resolved to the same small radius in southeastern Idaho. Amy screenshot the logs, saved them to her encrypted drive, then opened a second window. She ran the most recent IP through 3 different databases, cross-referencing against public utility records. Belmont, Idaho. Residential service address, 428 Maple Street. Account holder, Marcus Holt, not Marcus Henderson, not Michael Holt, not an alias, his real name. He'd been living there under his real name for 18 years. Amy stood up from her desk, walked to the kitchen, poured water she didn't drink, then returned to the screen. The address was still there. She ran it through property records. The house had been purchased in 2003. Single-family residence, 3 bedrooms, last assessed at $180,000. No mortgage on file, paid in cash or cleared years ago. She checked the time, 3:20 a.m. She could call her mother. She could tell her that Marcus wasn't dead, that he'd been living in Idaho this entire time, that he'd never actually disappeared. He'd just left. She didn't call. Instead, she opened the folder she kept on her desktop, the one labeled MH. Inside were scanned police reports from 2002, copies of the missing person case file she'd requested when she turned 18, photographs from the last family trip they'd taken to the San Juan Islands. Her father standing on the ferry deck, squinting into the sun. Her mother's arm around his waist. Amy, 6 years old, holding a stuffed orca she'd named Splash. 2 weeks after that photo was taken, Marcus Holt walked out of their house in Seattle and never came back. No note, no phone call, no body. The police had investigated for 6 months, found nothing, and eventually filed the case as a voluntary disappearance. Her mother had spent 3 years convinced he'd been in an accident, that his body was in a ravine somewhere, that he'd lost his memory. Then she'd spent 2 more years angry. Then she'd remarried. Amy had spent 18 years learning how to find people who didn't want to be found. She closed the folder and pulled up a map. Belmont was an 8-hour drive, maybe 7 if she didn't stop. She could be there by noon. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Are you still up? Saw your light on from the driveway?" Claire lived 4 blocks away now, in a townhouse with her second husband, Richard. She drove past Amy's apartment on her way to work at the hospital. She worried. She checked in. She'd built a life that moved forward, and she wanted Amy to do the same. Amy typed back, "Finishing a case. Go to bed, Mom." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "You work too much. Come to dinner this week." "I will." Another pause. "You're not searching again, are you?" Amy locked her phone without answering. She packed a bag, 2 days of clothes, laptop, charging cables, the case file printed and bound, though she wasn't sure why she needed a physical copy when everything was already digital. Maybe because she wanted something she could hold. Maybe because she needed to see the paper, the ink, the proof that this wasn't something she'd imagined. By 4 a.m., she was on I-90 heading east. The drive gave her too much time to think. She tried to plan what she'd say, how she'd approach him, whether she'd approach him at all. Maybe she'd just confirm he was alive and leave. Maybe that would be enough. It wasn't enough. She knew it wasn't enough before she reached the Idaho border. She stopped once for gas and coffee, then kept driving. The landscape flattened, the trees thinned, and by the time she reached Belmont, the sky had turned the pale blue of early spring. The town was smaller than she'd expected. One main street, a grocery store, a hardware shop, a diner with a gravel parking lot. She passed a school with a faded sign, Belmont K-12. 428 Maple Street was on the north edge of town, a single-story house with white siding and a detached garage. The lawn was mowed. There was a truck in the driveway, newer model, clean, a basketball hoop over the garage door. Amy parked 2 houses down and waited. At 1:15 p.m., the front door opened. A man stepped out, older, grayer, but the build was right. The way he moved was right. He turned to say something to someone still inside, then walked toward the truck. A teenage boy followed him out. Tall, maybe 15 or 16, wearing a hoodie and jeans. He said something Amy couldn't hear, and the man, Marcus, laughed. It was a short laugh, easy, the kind that came from familiarity. They got in the truck and backed out of the driveway. Amy followed. They drove to the hardware store on Main Street. Amy stayed in her car, watched them go inside. Through the window, she could see them walking the aisles. Marcus picked up a package of screws, showed it to the boy, who nodded. They moved like people who'd done this 100 times. No hesitation, no tension. They came out 12 minutes later carrying a bag and a length of PVC pipe. The boy took the pipe, balanced it on his shoulder like a bat, and Marcus said something that made him grin. Amy's hands were shaking. She waited until they drove away, then sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to decide what to do next. She couldn't go to the house. Not yet. Not while the boy was there. She needed to know more first. She needed to know if Marcus had told anyone about Seattle, about Claire, about her. She pulled up property records again, cross-referenced the address with phone listings, found a name she hadn't seen before, Teresa Lynn, listed as co-resident since 2005. Amy ran the name. Teresa Lynn, 46 years old, worked at the Belmont Community Center, no criminal record, no marriage certificate on file linking her to Marcus. But that didn't mean much in a small town where people didn't always formalize things. Amy found the community center, a low brick building near the school. She parked, went inside, asked the woman at the front desk if Teresa was available. "She's in the back room setting up for tomorrow's craft class. I can get her." "That's okay. I'll wait." The woman disappeared down a hallway. Amy stood by a bulletin board covered in flyers, youth basketball signups, AA meetings, a fundraiser for the fire department. A minute later, a woman emerged. Short dark hair, practical clothes, wary eyes. "Can I help you?" Amy had rehearsed this part. "My name is Amy. I'm looking into someone's background for a case I'm working on. I think you might know him. Marcus Holt?" Teresa's expression didn't change, but her posture did. She folded her arms. "What kind of case?" "Just a records check, nothing criminal. I wanted to confirm some details about his residence history." "You're not local?" "No, I'm from Seattle." That landed. Teresa's eyes narrowed. "I don't think I can help you. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to verify." Whatever you think you know, Teresa said quietly. It won't help anyone. You should go. She turned and walked back down the hallway before Amy could respond. Amy stood there for a moment, then left. She sat in her car outside the community center, hands on the wheel, breathing slowly. Teresa knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. Amy pulled out her phone and scrolled through the photos she'd brought. She found the one from the San Juan Islands. Marcus, Claire, 6-year-old Amy with the stuffed orca. She saved it to her phone, then drove back to the hardware store. She waited. At 4:30 p.m., Teresa's car pulled into the parking lot. She went inside, came out 5 minutes later with a small bag. Amy got out of her car and walked over before she could talk herself out of it. Teresa. Teresa stopped, saw her, and her face went flat. I told you? Amy held up her phone. I need you to see this. Teresa looked at the screen. The photo showed Marcus Holt, 34 years old, standing on a ferry deck with his arm around a woman and a little girl holding a stuffed whale. Teresa stared at it for a long time. When she finally looked up, her voice was very quiet. Who are they? His wife, Amy said, and his daughter. Teresa's face didn't crumple. It went still, the way faces do when the brain is working too fast to allow expression. When? 2002. Teresa looked at the photo again, then at Amy. You're the girl. Yes. Teresa handed the phone back. Her hands were steady. Does he know you're here? No. Teresa nodded slowly. Then she got in her car and drove away. Amy went back to the motel she'd checked into that morning. She sat on the bed, laptop open, staring at nothing. Her phone rang at 8:47 p.m. Unknown number. Local area code. She answered. You shouldn't have come here. Marcus's voice. She hadn't heard it in 18 years, but she recognized it immediately. Where are you? She asked. The parking lot, room 12. Amy looked at the door. Through the window, she could see a truck idling 2 spaces down. Come inside, she said. The man who walked through the door looked 52 years old. The last time Amy had seen her father, he'd been 34. She'd studied photographs for years, tried to imagine the changes time would bring, but the reality was different. His hair had gone gray at the temples. He moved more carefully, like someone who'd learned not to rush. He closed the door behind him and stood there, not sitting, not moving closer. You shouldn't have come here, he said. Amy stayed in the chair by the small table. She'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, imagined what she'd say, how she'd feel. Now that it was happening, her mind was blank except for the facts. Marcus Holt, 52. Living in Belmont for 18 years. 1 son, age 15. I work in digital forensics, she said. Your email account logged in from an IP address in Idaho. I traced it. He nodded once, unsurprised. I figured someone would, eventually. You didn't hide. No. She waited for him to explain, but he didn't. He just stood there, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Not guilt, not defensiveness. Something closer to resignation. Why? She asked. Why didn't I hide? Or why did I leave? Both. Marcus pulled out the other chair and sat down, but he didn't lean back. He kept his hands on the table, flat against the surface. I didn't hide because I wasn't running from anyone. I left because I couldn't reconcile who I was with the life I'd built. Amy felt something tighten in her chest. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. You had a daughter. I know. And a wife. I know that too. She wanted him to flinch, to show something, but his face stayed calm. It made her angrier than shouting would have. There was no affair, he said quietly. No crime, no threat. I woke up one morning and realized I'd been pretending for years, and I couldn't do it anymore. Pretending what? That I wanted the life I'd chosen. He looked at his hands. I was 26 when I married your mother, 28 when you were born. I thought I knew what I wanted. I didn't. Amy's voice came out flat. So you just left? Yes. Without telling anyone. I left a note. A note. She almost laughed. You left a note and disappeared for 18 years. I didn't think it would help to stay and explain. I thought a clean break would be easier. Easier for who? He met her eyes then, and she saw something shift in his expression. Not regret, exactly. Recognition. For me, he said. The honesty was worse than a lie would have been. Amy looked away, focused on the edge of the table, the cheap laminate peeling at the corner. When did you meet her? She asked. Teresa. A year after I left. I was working contract jobs, moving around. I came through Belmont for a 2-week gig and stayed. Does she know? Marcus didn't answer right away. When Amy looked up, his jaw was tight. She knows I was married before. She knows I have a daughter. Does she know you never told us where you went? That Mom filed a missing person report? That I was 6 years old and spent years thinking you were dead? His hands pressed harder against the table. No. What about your son? What about him? Does he know? Marcus shook his head. Amy leaned forward. So you built a whole life on a lie. I built a life on the truth of who I am now. I didn't tell them about Seattle because it doesn't change anything. It's not relevant to... Not relevant? Her voice rose before she could stop it. You have a 15-year-old son who has no idea his father abandoned another family. You think that's not relevant? He's not responsible for my choices. Neither was I. The silence that followed was heavy. Marcus looked at her, and for the first time, his expression cracked. Not much, just enough to show something underneath. No, he said. You weren't. Amy forced herself to breathe. She'd come here for answers, and now she had them. They didn't feel like she'd thought they would. Did you ever think about reaching out? She asked. Marcus hesitated. Once, when you turned 18, I looked you up online, found out you'd gone to college, started working. I thought about sending a message. Why didn't you? Because it would have been selfish. I would have been doing it for me, not for you, to make myself feel better. And you think not reaching out was less selfish? I think it was the only choice I had left. Amy studied him. The man sitting across from her wasn't a ghost anymore. He was solid, real, specific, and he was a stranger. I could tell them, she said. Marcus didn't react. I know. I could go to Teresa tomorrow, show her the same photo I showed her today, tell her everything. You could? I could find your son at school, tell him his father lied to him for 15 years. You have that right. She wanted him to beg, to offer something, some leverage, some reason not to. But he just sat there, waiting. You're not going to ask me not to, she said. No. Why not? Because you already know what it would do to him. Marcus's voice stayed level. Ethan didn't choose this. He's 15. He thinks his life is solid. If you tell him the truth, it won't just hurt. It'll rewrite everything he believes about who he is. Like it did for me. Yes. So I'm supposed to just let it go? Pretend I didn't find you? I don't know what you're supposed to do. I just know what the consequences are. Amy closed her eyes. She thought about the boy she'd seen at the hardware store, laughing at something Marcus had said. She thought about her mother, who'd built a new life and remarried and finally stopped looking over her shoulder. She thought about Teresa, who'd spent the last few hours trying to process the fact that the man she loved had been lying by omission for nearly 2 decades. And she thought about herself at 6 years old, sitting at the kitchen table, asking when Daddy was coming home. You don't get to be forgiven, she said. Marcus nodded. I know. You don't get to feel better about this. I don't. She opened her eyes. I'm not doing this for you. If I walk away, it's because I won't do to your son what you did to me. I understand. Amy stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but she made herself walk to the door. She stopped with her hand on the handle and looked back. Did you ever love us? Marcus's face didn't change, but something in his eyes did. I don't know if I knew how to. She left without answering. Outside, the air was cold and clear. She sat in her car for a long time, engine off, hands on the steering wheel. Then she drove back to Seattle. She didn't call her mother from the road. She didn't stop at her apartment first. She drove straight to the storage unit on the south edge of the city, the one she'd rented 6 years ago when the files got too heavy to keep at home. The unit smelled like cardboard and dust. She pulled the chain for the overhead bulb. The box labeled MH was in the back corner, exactly where she'd left it. She opened it on the concrete floor. Police reports from 2002, printed email threads, phone records, a timeline she'd constructed when she was 19, color-coded by source reliability. Beneath that, older things, a birthday card her father had given her the month before he disappeared, a photo of the three of them at the zoo. She'd kept everything because she thought someday it would matter. That if she just found the right thread, pulled it carefully enough, the whole thing would unravel and make sense. Now she knew. It hadn't unraveled. It had just stopped. She took the timeline and the police report. She left the card and the photo. Then she closed the box and carried it to her car. At home, she sat at her desk and opened the physical case file she kept there, the one she updated every few months whenever she ran a new search or checked a database. The last entry was from 2 weeks ago. Logan detected, Belmont, Idaho. She wrote one more line. March 18th, 2020. Visual confirmation. Subject located. Case closed. She didn't write what he'd said. She didn't write about Teresa or Ethan or the motel room. She didn't need to. The facts were enough. She put the file in the box from the storage unit, sealed it with packing tape, and labeled it with the date. Then she slid it onto the top shelf of her closet, behind 2 winter coats she never wore. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "Hey, how was the trip? Call me when you're free." Amy stared at the message for a long time. Her mother had remarried 7 years ago. David was kind, steady, patient in ways Marcus never had been. Claire laughed more now. She'd stopped checking the mailbox like she was waiting for something. If Amy told her, that would end. Claire would want details. She'd want to know why Marcus left, why he never came back, whether he ever thought about them, and Amy would have to decide how much truth to give her, whether to say that Marcus hadn't been taken, hadn't been lost, had just walked away and built a better version of the life he didn't want. She typed back, "Trip was good. I'll call you tomorrow." She didn't call the next day or the day after. She took a contract job analyzing server logs for a tech company in California, something that required focus and no emotional overhead. She worked 14-hour days. She didn't run searches on Marcus Holt. She didn't check the email account. 3 weeks later, her mother called. "You're avoiding me," Claire said. Not angry, just certain. Amy didn't deny it. "I've been busy." "You're always busy." A pause. "Did something happen on your trip?" "No." "Amy." She closed her eyes. "I'm fine, Mom." "You don't sound fine." "I just needed some space. That's all." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know you don't have to keep looking, right? For him. I know you think I don't know, but I do. And I'm telling you, you don't owe him that." Amy's throat tightened. "I know." "Do you?" "Yeah." She swallowed. "I stopped." Another pause, longer this time. "Okay," Claire said finally. "Okay, good." They talked about other things after that. David's new job, a trip Claire was planning to visit her sister in Portland. Small things, safe things. When they hung up, Amy sat very still. She thought about Ethan, the way he'd laughed at something Marcus said in the hardware store. The way Marcus had ruffled his hair, easy and unself-conscious. She thought about Teresa, the shock on her face when she saw the photo. The way her hands had trembled. She could still send it. An anonymous email to Teresa with the dates, the addresses, the proof. Or she could call Claire back and tell her everything. Let her mother decide what to do with it. But she didn't. Not because Marcus deserved protection, he didn't. Not because it would undo what he'd done, it wouldn't. She didn't do it because Ethan had no part in his father's choices. Because there was a kind of cruelty in making someone carry a truth they didn't ask for, just because you couldn't carry it alone anymore. Her father had made that choice for her when she was 6. She wouldn't make it for Ethan now. That didn't mean forgiveness. It just meant stopping. A month later, she got an email. It came to her work address, not the personal one. The subject line was blank. The message was 2 sentences. "Thank you. I know you didn't do it for me." No signature. But she knew who it was. She deleted it without responding. In May, she took a new contract. A missing person case. A teenager who disappeared from a suburb outside Tacoma. The parents had hired her because the police had moved on. She found the girl in 72 hours. She was staying with an older boyfriend 2 towns over. She didn't want to go home. Amy gave the parents the address anyway. What they did with it wasn't her job. She thought about that for a long time afterward. What it meant to give someone information they might not be ready for. Whether finding an answer was the same as solving the problem. She didn't have a clean conclusion. She didn't think there was one. In July, she went to dinner at her mother's house. David grilled salmon. Claire made a salad with strawberries and goat cheese. They ate on the back patio, and her mother talked about the garden she was planning for the fall. At one point, Claire looked at her and said, "You seem different." "Different how?" "I don't know. Lighter, maybe." She smiled. In a good way. Amy didn't feel lighter. She felt like someone who'd been carrying a box for 18 years and had finally set it down. That wasn't lightness. It was just the absence of weight, but she smiled back. "Maybe." That night, she went home and opened her laptop. She ran a search on Belmont, Idaho, not for Marcus, just the town. She wanted to see if anything had changed, if there were records, news, anything that suggested disruption. There wasn't. The town was still small. The population hadn't shifted. No public records indicated anything out of the ordinary. She closed the laptop. She didn't know if Teresa had confronted Marcus. She didn't know if Ethan had ever asked questions. She didn't know if the life Marcus had built was still standing, or if the weight of the lie had finally collapsed it. She didn't need to know. What she had was this. Her father had left because he wanted to. He was alive. He had chosen a different life, and that life didn't include her. It never had. That was the answer. It wasn't the one she'd wanted, but it was complete. She thought about the girl from Tacoma sometimes, wondered if she'd gone back home, if she'd stayed with the boyfriend, if the parents had forced her back or let her go. She thought about her father too. Not as much. Not the way she used